Wednesday afternoon to 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Training camp gets underway end of next week out in the Greenbrier for the Cleveland Browns. So ESPN has been doing a poll of executive coaches, scouts, ranking top 10 in the NFL at different position groups. Today they unveiled their top 10 edge rushers. Number 1, Myles Garrett. He gets the nod ahead of T.J. Watt and Micah Parsons. Now, NFL defensive coordinator, if you don't double team him, he's going to effing kill you. That's for our voicemailer, Jim from Rochester, who said everybody gets double teamed. And then an AFC executive, I don't think he's changed at all. He's just gotten more help in 2023 around him, which has accentuated his play. He's always been the same dominant guy. Let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Jeff, it kind of confirms, the folks around the league are agreeing with what we see. Garrett's a handful, and if you put good guys around him, and I would argue they have more around him this year, he's going to be even better.
Well, you think some people, around there and on that Browns defensive line probably are going to improve their game a little bit and step up a little bit, with Myles. And, for anybody that seems to maybe have their panties in a bunch here, he was the reigning defensive player of the year. So the fact that he was, basically chosen as the number 1 edge rusher in the NFL headed into this season shouldn't shock anybody. I think you made a really, really strong point. The only people that seem to maybe have any criticism of Myles Garrett are a small fraction sometimes of the Cleveland Browns fan base, and probably anybody associated with the Pittsburgh Steelers fan base. Those are the only ones that sometimes, maybe don't see the greatness. Myles won that award last year. We all know that there was about, almost 12 total quarters towards the end of the season where, Myles wasn't 100%. Was out there because he needed to be. It was a stretch run. Maybe if the team was out of it, those are games maybe he would have been on the field for. His rookie year started a tad bit slow. There was some missed time. Remember, there was a trip to Europe that year, and Myles missed out with a concussion. But ever since then, he's just absolutely just been the force and, a complete, slam dunk of an investment of a number 1 overall pick. He turned out in every which way but loose as far as, being that type of guy. He's going to hit 100 career sacks this year. There's going to be a spot waiting for him in Canton. He's just been a really, really special talent. And I think the thing that we all, everybody who follows this team and all the work that we do, I think that thing we're starting to see is, the maturity aspect of Myles, where he is now as a person, and the fact that he's just having a lot more fun. It's great to be a great player, but if you're on a team that's not going anywhere, it certainly, doesn't have the same juice. But now that this team is successful, this team is legitimate, you kind of see Myles almost in a whole new light where, he's one of the guys is basically what it comes down to.
So this is from the 33rdteam.com. Those are guys that are former NFL executives and the like, have worked in the league. NFL's top 20 players over 30 years entering the 2024 season. Number 1, Chris Jones. Number 2, Tyreek Hill, wide receiver. Number 3 is Trent Williams, offensive tackle. Checking in at 18 is Joel Bitonio. He's 32 years old, 5-time All-Pro, has made 6 straight Pro Bowls, has had great strength and athleticism. Plus, he's a durable player, has only missed 2 starts over his last 7 seasons. And Bitonio has been great. Couple more years. It's tough for guards to make it into the Hall of Fame. Couple more years at the level he's been at, and I think Joel Bitonio's entering that realm.
I would say if you look at his resume, yes, you would think that he's probably on a Hall of Fame path. But you do look at that one spot that he is a guard. And certainly it's not going to be where he was part of, say a New England Patriot regime where he was part of 4 Super Bowls, 1, 3, et cetera, et cetera. But, and there was that succession path, where, Joe went. And it was kind of obvious that Joel was going to be the guy here, to lead this offensive line through his stellar play, through his leadership, through carrying himself the same way that Joe carried himself, not being the big, not being bigger than anybody else in the room, even though technically you are the biggest, baddest dude on that offensive line. And for Joel, last year, it ended certainly a little banged up, a little dinged up. And, we're hitting that certain age, you're maybe, you don't hold that, players usually say 80% or better health-wise, I'm good to go. The later you get into your 30s, it's harder and harder to hit that number week in, week out. it means maybe, you practice a tad bit less, you get, ready to go a little bit more sooner. But, Joel he's just had an outstanding career here. And again, this is another guy that was here when this franchise was nobody, was nothing. And now all of a sudden, as the team gets more and more recognition because they are a good team, they get more spotlight onto him. You realize that there have been some good players here. And certainly Joel has been one of the guys that has completely and utterly changed the way this fan base is viewed.
So I know you've talked about this on the Locked On Browns podcast. Some of the best roster battles are going to be going on in the trenches for the Browns. Take us through that and kind of, the thought behind that.
Well, you look now. Maurice Hurst was a really, really impressive young player impressive player for this team last year. You take into account all the time he had missed up into his career. Finally got a chance where he put together almost a whole season. But now you look, they added Jefferson to that offensive line. You certainly brought back, Shelby Harris. You already have Dalvin Tomlinson. You drafted Michael Hall, and you're in a spot here now where you're probably only going to keep 5 defensive tackles. And, there's going to be, an odd name left out. It's not going to be Hall. It's not going to be Hall. It's probably not going to be Jefferson. It's not going to be Shelby Harris. It's certainly not going to be Dalvin Tomlinson. And then you get to that spot where it's that number 5 defensive tackle. And, it could be a tough spot for a guy, certainly, who was a big time player for this team last year, Maurice Hurst, and before he went, on a season-ending IR. Great player, great story. He seems like he absolutely wants to be a part of this team. But the numbers game get a little tight, and the same thing's going to happen on the offensive side of the ball. You already have your 5 starters. Juwan Jones is your 6th offensive line. Then you get in that battles where you have Michael Dunn, who's been here for years. You drafted Zinter, obviously, to be, a guard of the future here. You're 3 deep at center. How's that going to work? You brought in a veteran in Brian Allen, who, was part of the Super Bowl winning team with the Los Angeles Rams. You have the second-year guy that you drafted from Ohio State last spring. And we're talking about some of these guys and mentioned some of these names, and these guys, James Hudson's been here for years too. And this is another guy. They're when it gets down to the cut down time and the musical chairs of it, they're really deep in these spots. And that means that not everybody's going to be able to stay. You're not just going to say, oh, well, we really like the guys we have. We're going to keep 12 offensive linemen and we'll just sacrifice it somewhere else. I mean, there's usually a code the way this is done. You either go 9 or 10 deep at offensive line. You either go 9 or 10 deep at defensive line. Nobody's going to go any deeper than that, even if they're satisfied with the units they have. Of course, the attrition can always happen, and somebody can, end up injured or out, whatever it be that as it may. But, they're really, really deep in these groups. And unfortunately, some guys that we've grown to see here for a while or maybe even appreciated, or even veterans that came over here just recently are probably not going to be guys that are going to be able to stay. There's going to be a couple names that go up on that waiver wire that 31 other teams are going to be really, really excited about. But Cleveland Browns fans most certainly are not going to be.
All right, so this again, something you discussed on your show. Burning questions that need to be answered for the Browns to truly contend for an AFC title.
One more time, David.
The burning questions that need to be addressed. This is what the offensive side of the ball here. Now, first off, it's going to be the offensive line because that was kind of a weak spot for them last year from what we have traditionally grown with over the last full 3 years of this Stefanski regime. It was their worst year. And again, we had talked about this. Maybe it was a good time for Callahan to move on just because the way it worked, if you know what I'm saying. So you bring in a new offensive line coach. Is that offensive line coach going to get back to that offensive line group going to get back to what we were accustomed to the first 3 years? We were talking consistently top 2, top 3, top 4 offensive line. Now, is that something they're going to be able to do? Big question. Amari Cooper, how does this work out? I don't think it's going to change the way Amari Cooper plays, whether or not he gets an extension done. Certainly the Browns would like to do an extension that involves money for 2025, but nothing further. But it's not so much that, but even when Amari does come back, the Browns are grooming other wide receivers. They are trying to see how much they have in Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, we all know they have a huge amount of faith in Jerry Jeudy from the contract extension they gave him, not necessarily the trade, but certainly the contract extension. They have a lot of faith in what they think Jerry Jeudy can do for them. Cedric Tillman is here. David Bell's going to get an opportunity. Thrash was drafted. Elijah Moore. There's not going to be as many opportunities for Amari Cooper this year as there certainly was last year. There's going to be a bigger, slicing of that pie as far as targets. You certainly want to keep the chief involved. You're going to get the running backs involved, all these wide receivers. And a lot of it, it's health. Deshaun, we assume everything we see looks like Deshaun is going to progress to be 100% ready to go for week 1.
The offensive line, of course, all three tackles are coming back from injuries. And, they were long injuries. The guys are just really starting to get back to work right now. Joel was dinged up. Wyatt was dinged up. Of course, Nick Chubb and his injury. When does he actually get back to the field? What percentage of the Nick Chubb that we've all known and grown and loved will Nick Chubb necessarily be? Those are big, big questions that have to be asked. And this is all based on the offensive side of the ball, because everybody believes, that would be the level, that the side of the ball that needs to get better. It would be the offensive side of the ball if this team truly wants to contend for an AFC championship, if it truly wants to get to a Super Bowl. So those are some big questions around basically every facet of the Browns, whether it's the offensive line, the passing game, the running game. Big questions in every one of those areas. And those are things that, hopefully we're going to get the correct answers, and we're going to get to see it put together correctly for this team to find the ultimate success that they believe they can have in 2024.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, and now I'm going to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, we're right back. Stay with us.
Can you believe this new $1,000 tax-free scratch-off? $18,000, $1,000 winners? Another winner? Good thing I brought my check-writing pens. You know what else is winning? My carpal tunnel syndrome. Wouldn't it be great for these guys if they could cash their tickets in online?
They can, with the Ohio Lottery app.
What? That's great! Wait, what's an app?
Attention shoppers, the Ohio Lottery's $1,000 tax-free $20 scratch-off is your best chance ever to win $1,000. And yes, you can cash it in online.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. Been a minute, brother. Referring to a caller yesterday about Kevin Stefanski and the scripted plays, has this guy ever heard of Bill Walsh? I mean, that's mind-boggling. Number two, he's talking about Myles Garrett. The guy battles 2 to 3 players every down. Where does he think he's going to get all this superhuman strength in the second half of the season? Of course he's going to get worn down a little, but he still comes out and produces. And number 3, can you tell me a little bit about Matt Landers, the kid from Arkansas or somewhere? And number 4, prayers for Bernie, man. God bless him, man. He brought life to Cleveland back in the day. He deserves the prayers. Thank you, Dave, for taking my call. You be safe, you and the family. Love you, brother.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Yeah, we've heard Bernie Kosar may need a liver transplant and dealing with Parkinson's, so absolutely wishing him best. Somebody that I got to know covering him, and also when he was with the ownership group when the Browns came back. Jeff, tell us a little bit about Landers. There was a guy that I'll explain to you. Scripted plays, team that scores first in the NFL wins 70% of the time. We had a caller that was like, scripted plays isn't going to win you anything. Arguing with stats right there. So the scripted plays, if you can score and get the lead, 70% of the time you win. Landers, I know you're familiar with him.
Yeah, but one other point here, though, just as far as the scripted plays. No Major League Baseball manager says, as the starting pitcher takes the hill, says, okay, guys, here's the batting order. There's a reason this is done. You look at this is why it's done. You put in your research. And yes, you know what? When you're not good, scripted plays looks bad. When you are good, scripted plays look good. Matt Landers was interesting and really kind of caught the eye. It was really just a vertical threat. He went down to Arkansas for his last year of college ball. It was like 40 receptions, 800 yards. Those numbers look pretty good. But he went to the combine, and at his size, and big, long, almost kind of looks like an NBA 3, ran 4.34. And then all of a sudden, everybody kind of like, oh, all right, who's this guy here? And with Landers, it's always tough. When you're a late round pick, and the NFL is just saturated with such good receivers nowadays. The receiving play in the NFL, I mean, if you wanted to probably take it back 10 to 15 years, it is probably almost, 100% better than it was. Any guy on any team, you look at a team like the Packers, and they've just been basically taking guys second, third, fourth round. People don't not want to stop talking about how good that Packers wide receiver room is. It is such a position that has gotten so much better over the years. A guy like Landers, problem is when you are the size that he is, it doesn't really necessarily set you up for a lot of success. Like what you do with the Rams, he would have a really difficult time being a part of that receiving unit. The short, quick routes and, being able to have such great body control and be able to stop on a dime. It's hard to do when you're 6'4" and change. But Landers is a big vertical threat. And that is one thing where some people who have been asking about him over the last couple of weeks, they got to see some of this in OTAs. They got to see, he was getting vertical on a consistent basis. He's a nice guy to have around. The Browns, look, it is a numbers game already. They're probably 6 deep, pretty much in 10 before they even begin training camp. But look, you keep trying to turn people's eyes, and maybe he gets himself to a practice squad, or if he does get cut, there's always injuries. There's always teams that are maybe one receiver short. And nowadays the way the wide receiver position, not everybody has that 6'4" guy. He is different from that mold because everybody's now looking for the 5'10", 5'11", the 6'1" guys, the guys who are quicker. Get open, can create more separation within space, can do more with the ball in their hands after the catch. So those guys are becoming more the norm, but everybody would still kind of like to have a 6'4" deep vertical threat. Landry's a guy that's just got to keep shopping. He's going to get his opportunity somewhere. I'm not necessarily sure it's going to be Cleveland, but you're 6'4", you run a 4.3, you can get open consistently deep. Somebody's going to find you, and somebody's going to get an opportunity at some point.
Yeah, well, if nobody else wants them, practice squad is a great place because you can develop route running skills and those kind of things that would play in addition to the 6'4" and that speed. Along those lines, this is from Dog Pound Daily, 3 potential breakout stars for the Browns in 2024. Number 3 might be a guy that has some of those similar traits. Cedric Tillman, wide receiver. He was kind of singled out end of minicamp by Kevin Stefanski. So if he can come in and do some work in training camp, he might earn some significant playing time. Number 2, Alex Wright. Some might argue he kind of broke out last year. Be interesting to see if he can take it up a level. Number 1, they go with Jerry Jeudy. And if you're talking breakout from Jerry Jeudy, he needs to get 1,000 yards because he's done pretty much everything but that so far in the NFL as well.
If you're talking Jerry Jeudy as your breakout player, and look, I don't think it's a wild thing to say, but if you're talking Jerry Jeudy as your breakout guy, what you're probably saying is that Jerry Jeudy is going to put up the top receiving numbers on this team this year. Might lead this team in receptions, could lead it in touchdown, maybe not all 3 possibly, but certainly could vie for being the team leader in touchdown reception, team leader in receptions, team leader in yards. I think the Browns have a lot of faith, and they believe that Jerry Jeudy is totally capable of that. Again, it wasn't the trade itself. It wasn't the compensation itself. It was the contract extension right away that told you how much the Cleveland Browns think of a guy like Jerry Jeudy. Cedric Tillman, and this is one where maybe one might cancel out the other. But I had a couple friends that were at OTAs, and they said you just could not believe it when you looked at Cedric Tillman. Like, he just looked like a different type of guy. Like, he didn't necessarily, a lot of people were like, 19's really going with the wide receivers? Are we sure he shouldn't be going over with David Njoku and the tight ends? It's just the way he's built. The Tennessee offense didn't really do him a lot of favors. He wasn't necessarily a good fit there. And as much as I do think it was a problematic time for Tillman last year, it certainly can't be easy when you are the rookie, and every time you turn around, you have a different quarterback. But there were a lot of lessons to be learned. And Joe Flacco, I know was a guy who was tried to be pretty vocal with him, and tried to work with him and say, hey, I understand that this is look, there's ways we do it in film, there's ways we do it in practice. But every now and then there's adjustments that got to be made within the game. So technically, yes, you always take this and it's 9 steps, cut here, this, that, the other thing. Or now it's maybe 8.5, or, these guys are covering it this way, so it's 8, or it's 10 because, they're laying off you. You got to eat up that cushion between yourself and the defensive back. So Cedric Tillman should be interesting because, there should have been a lot of growth and a lot of things Cedric Tillman could have taken from, the 2023 season, put into his offseason workouts, and let's see if he can apply that to greater success in 2024. The defensive side of the ball, I certainly think that Alex Wright is probably one that certainly needs to be mentioned. I think he showed signs towards the end of 2022 when he was getting a lot more playing time. I wouldn't be stunned if Alex Wright was maybe 2nd or 3rd on this team as far as the defensive ends are concerned in sacks. I think there's a chance he could maybe have more sacks than, Okoronkwo. Maybe, Zadarius Smith, takes another step the wrong way, like it seemed like he did last year. There's more opportunity for Alex Wright. Certainly, there's a lot of names as far as, what can be done on the defensive side of the ball and guys that can step up. For me, it's not necessarily, what he's going to do as far as, stats and things like that. But Jordan Hicks is going to be interesting because everybody talked about Anthony Walker and the leadership and the type of guy he was, and the young guys gravitated to him and they all kind of got mentally better. But you have a better linebacker in Jordan Hicks than Anthony Walker was. And Jordan Hicks can do all of those things that Anthony Walker did as far as a leadership aspect, as far as working with younger players and saying, yep, you know what, coach said this, coach said that. I faced this team 7 times, and that guard, when his foot is pigeon-toed, I'm telling you right now, he's pulling. And it's just something different than you get from somebody that's been out there so much. Jordan Hicks, for as quiet as it was and not a very heavy monetary free agent signing, that one could pay big, big dividends because, again, you're getting a guy with all the leadership aspect of Anthony Walker, but you're getting a guy with a lot more success on the field over the last few years.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, and now I'm going to step aside, take one more time out. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. This is from Dogs by Nature. 5 questions heading into training camp for the Browns. Number 1, when will Amari Cooper report to camp? Will there be any holdout? Didn't show up at minicamp. Number 2, what combination of guys is best on the offensive line? We'll do the third one here as well. How different will the revamped offensive line look? So let's handle those 3 first because they kind of fit together. Cooper, I'd be surprised if they don't figure something out pretty quickly with him.
I think the thing with Coop is, look, it seems we all know what the Browns are offering. And look, if you want more money and you want a little bit more security, that's what you're going to have to do. He's not going to go the Nick Chubb route. He's not going to just come back, play out the season, and see what happens. You want it. The Browns are willing to give it to you for 1 year. And do we have to maybe get to this spot again next year? Very well, maybe. Or, it is where Cooper has to fight for, more money, that at that time. He's got something in his back pocket. It's not going to be basically a lame duck year for Amari Cooper. The Browns are willing to give him the satisfaction to make sure he's not going in here with no future money not coming. They are trying to at least take care of one aspect of it. It may not be as long as Amari wants. And again, the other thing is I just don't see Amari creating a stink. He's just never been that type of guy. He's gotten many places between Vegas, Dallas, and here. He's always been a consummate professional. I think it's going to get worked out. It just may not happen in Amari Cooper's favor.
So when we talk about the offensive line, how that looks, and the revamped offense, what do you think of those?
I think it's going to be a lot more open. And look, we talked about this last year, and we kind of said that this team looked and appeared like they were going to gravitate away from being Nick Chubb being their top option, and it was going to be Deshaun Watson. It all made sense, certainly, what you invested, what you paid. And then there we were by week 7, week 8, and neither one of them are around anymore. And we were just kind of seeing what the Browns could, basically throw up against the wall and see what stuck week in, week out, which they did a fantastic job with. But, Ken Dorsey's influence, and I saw somewhere else somebody mentioning this, the running back highly involved in the passing game in Buffalo. James Cook was a very, very busy guy carrying the ball, catching balls out of the backfield. You bring in a guy like Nyheim Hines, Jerome Ford, the former high school wide receiver, now running back. And, Jerome did a really, really good job last year. A lot of people don't want to believe it, but the role he was thrust into and how bad a situation it was when it first went down, and no Nick, and oh my God, what's his team going to do? And he saw the whole Jerome Ford package. He runs pretty well when he's got blocking in front of him. He certainly is a more productive receiver than we ever saw Nick Chubb be for this team. So that's certainly the influence there. The offensive line, it's not necessarily changes within personnel, but it's a new coach. He's going to do things differently. And I honestly think, with this team as better and heavy as it is on the offensive line, it probably should be a good thing because, you got to, every now and then you got to switch it up. You kind of got to do something a little bit different. And, certainly, with, this new offensive line coach coming in here, it's not going to be, I'm just going to come in here and do everything the way Bill did. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. It's going to be my offensive line. And it's going to give the guys a chance to basically grow a little bit, adapt, to change. And, I don't see any reason why these guys, the consummate professionals that they are, aren't going to embrace that challenge and certainly, accept it and certainly, run with it and hopefully get this offensive line back to the top 5 unit that we have grown accustomed to.
All right. Before I let you go, the final 2 questions of the 5. Will the team need to add another tight end during camp? And 5th, who calls the plays? So it'll be interesting to see. I'm, Jeff, people get aggravated with me. I don't really, if Kevin Stefanski feels like he should call the plays, I'm fine with that. I have no issue with him as a play caller at all. If he thinks Ken Dorsey should call the plays, okay, that'd be fine too.
Well, the thing with the play calling, though, is if these are our 2 options, one of them, with 5 quarterbacks last year, led his team to the playoffs, calling plays. Unfortunately, the other guy was fired from his job. So I don't, and look, for 4 years now, Kevin Stefanski has been the play caller for this franchise. Why in the world do we think this is going to change now? Maybe it does. Maybe it does change. I'm not necessarily sure I see it. And if you just want to get down to the bare, and the tax of it, again, Kevin Stefanski went to the playoffs last year, calling the plays for this team. And unfortunately, Ken Dorsey was dismissed from the position he had last year. It kind of tells me that maybe I think it's going to be Kevin Stefanski.
Relative to tight end, right now there's nobody out there that it is. So I think that's a position you look and you see who's available come cut down day.
Well, that also could be one of these. Look, the Browns are going to have several players that they're not going to be able to keep, that if they expose to the waiver wire, they're going to go on to another destination. So it can be one of these ones where it's, hey, you're not going to be able to keep that tight end. I can't keep this 6th or 7th cornerback on my roster. So as opposed to fighting through all of this, and, the Browns obviously are going to be a little bit further down the waiver wire than, we had been accustomed to at times. And it might be one of those, hey, well, I can't keep this guy. You can't keep that guy. Let's help each other out. Phone call to Minnesota where, obviously they have a working relationship. And maybe, you find a tight end that way. Yes, I am still concerned about the tight end position. It could just be a factor of, David is so great. They just feel that maybe there's, if something were to happen to him, there is no replacing him, which certainly could make some sense. But yeah, I'd feel a little bit better if there was a little bit more in that room. I'm surprised they didn't draft one. I'm actually surprised they didn't draft one the year before. I personally would have just kept Harrison Bryant around for the money he was making. Was never a guy that was highly thought of, but was a guy that did make plays from time to time. But again, this team is pretty deep in a lot of areas. And we always have a lot of faith in the work that certainly Andrew Berry does. So, if it's an issue, I'm sure Andrew Berry will find some time and find some way to get it resolved before we start kickoff week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys.
Jeff Lloyd, great stuff as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
All the best, gentlemen. It's here before you know it.
Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Always really good Browns coverage, Locked On Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus. Straight ahead, we continue talking Browns. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Can you believe this new $1,000 tax-free scratch-off? $18,000, $1,000 winners? Another winner? Good thing I brought my check writing pens. You know what else is winning? My carpal tunnel syndrome. Wouldn't it be great for these guys if they could cash their tickets in online?
They can, with the Ohio Lottery app.
What? That's great! Wait, what's an app?
Attention shoppers, the Ohio Lottery's $1,000 tax-free $20 scratch-off is your best chance ever to win $1,000. And yes, you can cash it in online.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Frank Schwab talked about the potential of the Browns' Deshaun Watson at quarterback. This is from Yahoo's Fantasy Football Show.
I think that they made the playoffs last year because they were so good around the quarterback position. It's not like Joe Flacco had some magic beans. He's still the same guy who looked completely washed up with the 2022 Jets. He was just in such a great situation. And I think that people love dunking on Deshaun Watson. I get every reason why. Everybody wants to root against Deshaun Watson. But there are reasons he hasn't played well the last couple of years, whether it was injuries or the suspension, which was all his fault. Obviously, I know that story. But if Deshaun Watson is just the 15th best quarterback in the NFL, which I don't think is asking too much of a guy who was once a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the NFL, I think the Browns can win a Super Bowl. I really do. I think that they're that good around the quarterback position that if Deshaun Watson is just okay, this team's going to win the division and they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. I just love their roster. I love the direction they're heading. It's just all about Deshaun Watson. If he stinks, and he could stink, there's no doubt about that. It's been a long time since he's played at an elite level or even an above average level. If he stinks, yeah, they're going to struggle because they're in a tough division. But I just kind of have left the light on for maybe Deshaun Watson is a good quarterback still, and we're just going to see it. Look, go back and look at the second half of the Ravens game last year. That guy's pretty good. Like, he is good at football, maybe not good at other things off the field, but I still think the Browns could be. The Browns are one of my teams. I'm buying this year. I'll switch my mind like I did on the 49ers last year very quickly if Deshaun Watson just looks terrible again. But I'm buying the Browns this year. I'm very, very high on them.
With that, let's welcome in Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus. Max, every time we get to this Deshaun Watson question, I ask, and I haven't asked this of you, the reason I'm optimistic Deshaun Watson can come back, I have not come up with a quarterback who has been a top 5 quarterback, made 3 Pro Bowls, had a sustained success in the NFL, and then hasn't had a catastrophic injury and then just couldn't play anymore. I mean, that's kind of, he's been banged up. It hasn't been a catastrophic injury. There was the suspension. I can't come up with anybody that had it for a sustained amount of time and lost it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, like we just heard, like he was like a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the NFL just a few years ago, right? And I obviously a couple years off is definitely going to be a big thing. And I think he's still, knocking off the rust that he's got right now, clearly knocking off the rust because he has been pretty bad since he's been back from that suspension. But yeah, I think it's kind of maybe a mental thing for Deshaun Watson now. Obviously, he went through a lot and by his own doing. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it. But yeah, I think it's just kind of maybe a mental thing with him right now more than anything else. And it remains to be seen whether or not he could ever be the same quarterback that he was with the Houston Texans, with the Cleveland Browns right now. And they're hoping he can be. They paid a lot of money for him. They also traded a lot to get him. So the Browns are desperately hoping he can be. But that is the biggest X factor, maybe in the entire NFL right now, is whether or not Deshaun Watson can return to the Houston Texans form that we saw.
So let's take a look at this. This chart is from PFF, Pro Football Focus, Browns quarterback depth chart. And you look at it, and you got Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, Tyler Huntley, Dorian Thompson. I look at those. I think he can win with their backups. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I'm not as confident that he can win with. I think he can win with Jameis Winston. I think he can win with Tyler Huntley based on what they have around him as well. When you look at this quarterback depth chart, the quarterback room, if you will, as a whole, as a guy that looks at this for Pro Football, what do you see with these guys in that room?
Yeah, certainly really talented backups, right? And I don't know if the high highs that Joe Flacco did when he was forced to take over for Deshaun Watson and ultimately won comeback player of the year in the NFL. But you got guys like Jameis Winston, who was a starter in the NFL not that long ago, right? You got guys like Tyler Huntley, who when Lamar Jackson went hurt, came in for him and actually performed pretty well, considering he was a backup quarterback. And then Dorian Thompson-Robinson has shown intriguing stuff as well in his young career too. So yeah, I think the quarterback room outside of Deshaun Watson is actually really, really good. In fact, I would say it's one of the better backup quarterback rooms that we have in the NFL right now, with maybe the best one actually, with Jameis Winston and Tyler Huntley and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Like, it's a really, really good three that you have, and Thompson-Robinson is probably the fourth stringer. Many teams would have him probably as a backup. So yeah, I think it's a really, really good quarterback room behind Deshaun Watson that if he gets hurt again, or if he continues to play terribly, then yeah, maybe you could turn to one of those guys and see if they can provide a spark for your team.
All right, let's look at this. This also from Pro Football Focus. Browns offense under Kevin Stefanski. And when you look at it, you see the grades 78.5, 77.8. That one that's in the 60s, I would caution. That was, you had P.J. Walker starting games. You had Dorian Thompson-Robinson as a rookie who didn't find out he was starting the first Ravens game until the morning of. You had a banged up Deshaun Watson playing and so on. When you look at the grades that Kevin Stefanski has earned, what do you see?
I think he's a really good offensive-minded head coach. I think he's proven that in his career, and I think he's a guy that I have full trust in to run an offense at a very nice level. And that's why I don't really blame any of the Watson struggles on anyone but Watson, right? Because he's had some good supporting cast in terms of the offensive line, in terms of Nick Chubb, a solid receiving core at least too. Yeah, I think that a lot of the blame is just on Watson. I think Stefanski has proven that he could be a really, really good head coach and a really good offensive mind in the NFL, and I think the grades show that right there. And yeah, I think he just needs to figure out the quarterback position, and more importantly, Deshaun Watson needs to figure out whether or not he can still be a franchise quarterback for a team.
When you look at what they've done on the offensive side of the ball with Dorsey, kind of revamping it, trying to build around Deshaun Watson's skill set, doesn't that make that, to me, that makes sense? If you're gonna acquire a guy, give him the contract you gave him, sink the draft capital into getting him, you better do everything you can to maximize that guy.
Yeah, it's smart. I think that's obviously like I said, it's the biggest X factor in the NFL is Deshaun Watson, and you need to make sure, if you're the Cleveland Browns, to surround him with as much as you can and make him as comfortable as possible. That way, if he fails, it's not your fault. There's been plenty of times in the NFL where quarterbacks have failed, and I would say, hey, maybe part of it really wasn't their fault. Like some guys are just in awful situations, and the Browns are doing a good job of putting Watson in a good situation. That way, if he does fail, like I said, you can just say, hey, you know what? He's just not the guy. And we got to move on, and we can find a different guy. So I think that's what the Browns are trying to do right now, and that's why so much of the pressure is now on Watson's shoulders and to show that, hey, I am worth the massive contract. I am worth the haul of picks that you traded to get me, and I can be the franchise quarterback for the Browns in the future.
All right, before we go to break, best 2024 offseason decisions by every AFC team. PFF goes, Browns re-signing Zadarius Smith. Re-signing Smith felt like one of the more underappreciated moves in the offseason. Remember, this is the guy that they brought in opposite Myles Garrett, and it enabled Garrett to take the next step in his progression and become Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, it took a lot of pressure off him, right? And I think he's probably the best defensive player that we have in the NFL, Myles Garrett. And adding a guy opposite of him and Zadarius Smith took a lot of pressure off of him. To just be the one guy, because I think the Browns' interior defensive line is a little bit more of a question mark. But having a guy opposite of Myles Garrett, a really, really capable pass rusher in Zadarius Smith, even though he's getting a little bit up there in age, is really important. And I think it's really, really smart of them to bring him back after you saw Myles Garrett have probably his best year yet as a Brown with a guy like Zadarius Smith opposite of him. So I think that's really smart of the Browns to bring it back and help be the Robin to Myles Garrett's Batman, if you will.
Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus, and I can step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Can you believe this new $1,000 tax-free scratch-off? $18,000, $1,000 winners? Another winner? Good thing I brought my check writing pens. You know what else is winning? My carpal tunnel syndrome. Wouldn't it be great for these guys if they could cash their tickets in online?
They can with the Ohio Lottery app.
What? That's great! Wait, what's an app?
Attention shoppers, the Ohio Lottery's $1,000 tax-free $20 scratch-off is your best chance ever to win $1,000. And yes, you can cash it in online.
We continue talking Browns with Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
We have quite a few interesting players on this team, young players on this team, specifically Jock at linebacker. He is very similar in a lot of ways in character and his abilities to Big Bill Willis, Hall of Famer. I venture to say that very few teams will be able to get around him once he gets his hands on them. And as far as the quarterback situation goes, we'll have to wait and see what Watson can do and whether the other backups can work themselves so we get back in the playoffs. So we've got some players in this defense, backfield, linebackers, and linemen, of course, with Miles. It's going to be hard for these other teams to get around that defense of ours. And, of course, we will score points. It seems to me that we have the nucleus offensively and defensively to be a playoff team.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Max, he's referring to Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in that first part of it. When you look at him, what do you see? Is that a guy that's on the verge of really taking that step into elite linebacker status?
I think it's certainly possible. I think he's right now a top 10 linebacker we have in the NFL right now. He's not the biggest linebacker in the world, but we makes up for it with great speed and great quickness. He's been a really, really good coverage player. In each of the last 2 years, he had PFF coverage grades above a 70 in each of the last 2 years. Also a really good blitzer as well. 18 pressures, 4 sacks, 87 pass rushing grade last year as well. So, again, not the biggest guy in the world, and maybe it won't be as dominant in run defense because of that. But as a blitzer and as a coverage player, he is really, really good because of how fast and how quick he is. So I'm a big fan of JOK. I think he could be a breakout star this year, and I already think he is a top 10 linebacker that we have in the NFL right now.
When you look at the secondary, what do you see? A lot is made of the Browns' defensive line, and rightly so. I think the defensive line is really good. It creates havoc. I think their secondary might be a little underappreciated.
I agree. We actually, we ranked every secondary in the NFL. We ranked actually every position unit in the NFL. If you want to check it out at pff.com. For secondary, we had Browns the 6th best secondary in the NFL. With guys like Denzel Ward, who's battled injuries, but he's really still one of the best corners in the league when healthy. Greg Newsome is a really, really good corner opposite of him. Martin Emerson's a really talented player as well. So, yeah, I think this is a secondary that's led by the corners, and I think their safety's got to get a little bit better play and stay healthy, really, at safety with guys like Grant Delpit and Juan Thornhill there. But their corners especially, I'm a big fan of Denzel Ward and Martin Emerson and Greg Newsome. I think that's a really, really good trio of corners to have, and it's one of the 10 best secondaries in the NFL right now.
Yeah, that's a fair point about Thornhill and Delpit. Both missed significant time and were banged up. So, at times you were starting, two guys that were DeAnthony Bell and Ronnie Hickman, who were undrafted free agents, that one of them a rookie as well. So, all right, before I let you go, take a look at some of these numbers with David Njoku, and this is where he ranks in Browns franchise history. It kind of surprised me. So he just turned 28. And he's 18th in receiving yards, 3,600. He's 11th already in receiving touchdowns at 25. And kind of we feel like he needs to be better in the red zone. He needs 4 touchdowns to pass Webster Slaughter, Braylon Edwards, and Michael Jackson. And again, he's just turned 28. When you look at Njoku, where's he rank in the NFL relative to tight ends?
We had him as the 9th best tight end in the NFL heading into next year. I think that's around the range where I'd put him as well. Made a breakout year this last year in year 7, really. He's kind of been a slow start to his career, but year 7 he really took off. Had a really good connection with Joe Flacco. He actually, a fun stat that we had is he forced 26 missed tackles just last year. That was right around his total from his entire career, basically. So he really had a breakout year last year. Elite athlete. And I think if he could have a connection with Deshaun Watson like he did with Joe Flacco, he could continue producing at a high level for a Browns receiving core that outside of Amari Cooper has some question marks. And, they got Jerry Jeudy in there as well and Elijah Moore there. But David Njoku, I think, is certainly one of the 10 best tight ends that we have in the NFL. And it seems like he's really just hitting his stride right now which would be really exciting for a Browns team that could use, more athletic players like him to step up.
Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Max.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Max Chadwick, make sure you check him out. Really good stuff with Pro Football Focus. We are going to turn our attention to the Guardians. We're going to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Guardians beat reporter Paul Hoynes joins us from Detroit. Guardians getting ready to play the Tigers. Game 3 of a 4-game set. We'll talk to Hoynesy coming up on Sports4CLE. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. Turn our attention to the Guardians, still one of the best records in all of baseball and certainly in the American League. They are in Detroit, game 3 of a 4-game series with the Tigers. Have split the first 2. Paul Hembo, one of the really good producers nationally from ESPN, makes his case for the Guardians' Emmanuel Clase to be the American League Cy Young Award winner for the first half of the year.
But award voting it's not a team-building exercise. It's a performance evaluation. And so I've, Buster, written down 3 stats that prove, at least in my opinion, why Clase has been the best pitcher in the American League to date. I'll start with his ERA+. A good one is 125, a bad one is 75, an average one is 100. Clase's ERA+ is 477. It's 50% better than any pitcher in baseball to throw at least 40 innings. Secondly, he's appeared in 43 games this season. Cleveland is 40-3. In those 43 games. He has allowed 0 earned runs in 39 of those 43 appearances and has not allowed multiple runs in any of those 43 appearances. In nearly half of his outings, 19 of 43, he has not allowed a single base runner. So that's from the perspective of his base runner avoidance. And lastly, and this is my favorite way to drive home his dominance, win probability added, as you know, is a stat that quantifies the percent change in a team's chances of winning from one event to the next. Clase's WPA is 3.4. That not only leads all pitchers in both leagues, he leads all American players, pitchers and position players. For context, Juan Soto is second. It's Emmanuel Clase first, Juan Soto second. By that single lone standard of measure, Clase has been the most valuable player in the American League this season.
With that, let's welcome in Paul Hoynes. He is in Detroit covering the Guardians series with the Tigers. Hoynes, that's a strong case for Clase. I know you wrote an article about him as well. Take us through that.
Yeah, Dave. I just think he's the best closer in baseball right now. Even more dominant than he has been the last 2 years. When 2 years ago he saved 42 of 46. Last year he still led the big leagues with 44 saves, but blew 12. But this year, he's been on fire. He's tied for the American League in appearances. He's just so consistent. He's kind of reeled it in. He's much more efficient. He's got a 0.67 whip. The opposition is hitting 167 against him. When he comes into a game, it's over. He's given up 4 earned runs all season.
Yeah, and the point that Hembo made, 40-3 in his 43 appearances. That's what the Guardians' record is. So you can't ask any more from your closer. So let's move to this, though. We've talked a couple of times about bullpen usage and the concern because the starters just aren't getting the innings in that you need. and that we were concerned about being overworked. So this is the Guardians bullpen when you look at it since June 10th. So that they've thrown 100 innings. The ERA is 3.15. They're fourth in baseball. Phillies 3.0, Cardinals 2.65, and the Braves 1.81. When you look at it season to date, Guardians are still the best bullpen in baseball, 2.58 ERA, but it jumps up, almost over half a run in the last month. But again, you see those names, Guardians, Braves, Dodgers, Phillies. Those are the best teams in baseball. You want to throw in the Orioles, that's fine. But those are among the best teams in baseball. It kind of, and again, I'm not flashing red lights, but it's something to be aware of. The earned run average is creeping up, and it's concerning because you're so reliant on this bullpen.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, Dave. The more you pitch, the more you expose yourself to getting hit. The problem is the starting rotation is throwing the fewest innings in the American League. So you're going to 4, 5, 6 relievers each night. If the starter is only going 4 1/3 or 5 1/3, you're really asking so much of an 8-man bullpen that it's bound to catch up to you. That workload is going to catch up to you.
All right. You also wrote an article. One of the things the Guardians are doing, they've brought in people to try to be able to take some innings off. Matthew Boyd, one of them. He's coming off of Tommy John surgery a year ago, trying to build it back up as far as the arm strength goes. I know you wrote an article about it, and what he's doing, ramping up. Take us through the article and what the Guardians are saying relative to Matthew Boyd.
Yeah, I saw him throw a simulated game last Saturday at Progressive Field. Looked very, very good. It was a 2-inning simulated game. He was thrown against Hedges and Will Brennan, Gabriel Arias. Mike Chernoff was goofing around after the session and said, Chernoff's the GM. He said, "Can we sign him? Can we activate him right now?" But it's still a work in progress. He's still going to have to go on a rehab assignment. And they anticipate, a pitcher, when he goes on a rehab assignment, has a 30-day window. So they think he's going to take most of that. And then if everything goes well, he should be ready to help this rotation, sometime in August.
All right. So here's another note. This is something that is from one of your Hoynes. Ben Lively on a pace to pitch over 150 innings this year. So that would be the most he's thrown since 2016 when he was in the Phillies minor league system. Since that time, only thrown over 100 pitches once. That was in 2020 when he was with the Samsung Lions in the KBO. Didn't have a great start last night. Is it a concern that that they're just running out on guys that have given them innings even in the rotation?
Yeah, I think Lively's 32. He's a veteran, knows his body. I think he'll be able to, kind of work through those concerns. But obviously, the inning ceiling is something that enters the picture. And I think Lively last night, he got hit in a right calf by a line drive. Then he gives up a single, then a 2-run homer. And that really kind of ruined his start because until then he was pitching very well. We'll have to see how he rebounds from that. But, yeah, I think they'll keep an eye on his innings. But I think the fact that he's been around and he's pitched a long time, I think he knows his body. If if he has to back off, he'll back off. But, if Lively, I think he wants to pitch. I'm sure he'd go out there tonight and pitch.
All right. So along the lines of acquiring more starting pitching, Spencer Howard, who Guardians acquired from the Giants, he'll get a start tomorrow afternoon as they wrap up that series. This is from MLB Trade Rumors, a chat that they do each and every week. Steve Adams is the one that moderates it. He was asked about, Bybee, Lively, Gavin Williams, and potentially adding arms. Adams replies, I think Bybee'd be a fine playoff arm. I'm sure they're hoping Gavin Williams pitches like one as well. To your point, I'd be surprised if Cleveland doesn't add an established arm in the next 3 weeks. That goes up to the trade deadline, which is wild to say since Cleveland never seems to go outside the organization for starting pitching. Their depth is finally looking shaky for the first time in he doesn't know how long, 2 decades. To him, it seems likelier they would trade for someone who they think they can improve on rather than pay sticker price for Crochet or Flaherty or one of the top arms on the market. More likely that they'll get a Trevor Rogers and fix him or plunk Ryan Feltner from the Rockies, only to make their fans groan and then go out to see him post 13 starts with a 3.50 ERA down the stretch or something to that effect. The point being, doesn't think they're going to unload the farm, of prospects to go out and get a guy that they might have for a year or two. It's an interesting concept, and I could see the Guardians thinking that way. You already have Boyd, you have Howard. Maybe get 2 or 3 more and see if you can find 2 of them that end up hitting their stride.
Yeah, Dave, that's a good point. Last year they brought in Noah Syndergaard, tried to get him turned around, didn't work. But that's their MO. I was talking to Carl Willis, kind of along those same lines, the pitching coach yesterday. And he was saying that, we don't have magic dust that we sprinkle on pitchers when we bring them in. He said that's a misconception. He goes, what we do is we try to find pitchers where we talk to them, we tell them what's the best version of yourself. Tell us what your best pitches are. Tell us what the order your pitches are. Tell us what you're doing when you're feeling good on the mound. What are you doing? And they give the guy a chance to go out there, let him work, and then maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks later they make some suggestions. The problem right now is are you going to be able to turn a guy around in 2 months or 4 weeks or 6 weeks whenever you get the guy?
Yeah, that's a fair question, and I'm sure that weighs into the decision-making process for the Guardians as well. Along those lines, this is from CBS Sports. Players who could be on the move in potential landing spots. We'll run through a number of them. They say Bo Bichette, shortstop, Blue Jays, potential suitors, Braves, Guardians, and Giants. He's 26. He's owed in the neighborhood of $27 million over the next 2 years, but he is controllable rest of this year plus 2 more. Jazz Chisholm, center fielder for the Marlins. They say Cardinals, Guardians, Pirates. Again, another 26-year-old. Athleticism has shown some pop. Pitcher, Jack Flaherty, right-hander. They say potential suitors for him, Braves, Guardians, Astros. Free agent at the year's end. Tigers have no reason to hold on to him. We'll see what the asking price would be on him. Another one in the Central Division, Eric Fedde, potential suitors, Cardinals, Guardians, Braves. Technically, Fedde is under contract next season, giving the White Sox another year to find a suitor. Oftentimes, when it comes to a 30-something mid-rotation starter, it's best to walk away when you're still ahead. It's interesting. Jose Soriano, right-handed pitcher for the Angels. Suitors, Guardians, Cardinals, Brewers. Generates a lot of grounders, upper 90 sinker, a lot of whiffs, spike curveball. Control has improved this season. It'll be interesting to see if that figures into it. And the last one they mentioned is Austin Gomber, left-handed pitcher for the Rockies. Guardians, Astros, Brewers are the suitors. Gomber, additional year of team control, making ample experience in the bullpen, making a potential useful utility pitcher. When you look at any of those, who makes the most sense, or which two make the most sense for the Guardians?
I like Flaherty. I like Fedde. We've seen a lot of Fedde this year, the Guardians, and he's pitched very, very well against them. The problem is, and Flaherty too pitched well in Cleveland against the Guardians. I liked him in St. Louis. He's had some injury problems, but I think he's healthy right now. Those are 2 guys that would certainly fit into this rotation. But you're dealing in your own division. Tough to make a deal, especially when you're dealing with teams in your own division, the price goes up like twofold. So we'll have to see how that works out.
Yeah, again, the White Sox and Tigers are not going to be in any hurry to try to help the Guardians out, especially with somebody who has team control for an additional year.
Yeah.
All right, before I let you go, you wrote an article, Stephen Kwan, talking about potential #1 overall draft pick that's coming up Sunday. And it's a guy who is also from Oregon State, like Stephen Kwan, Travis Bazzana. So just take us through what Kwan had to say about Bazzana.
Yeah, it was really interesting, Dave. I just kind of I wondered, because everybody in baseball knows everybody else. So I wondered, if Kwan knew Bazzana. Obviously, like you said, they both went to Oregon State. And Kwan told me that a couple of years ago when he would go back to school, after he turned pro and to work out there, and he was hitting, and he said this freshman came up and asked him, can I watch you hit? Can I watch you go through your drills? And Kwan said, sure. And the freshman didn't say anything for about an hour and a half. And then after the practice was over, the drills were over, he couldn't stop asking him questions. And the freshman turned out to be a Bazzana. And, the friendship grew from there. And, the Guardians have asked Kwan about Bazzana. He's rated as one of the maybe top 2, top 3 players in the draft, in the country. He's coming off a great year in Oregon State. He's a second baseman, maybe limited defensively, but just had an outstanding year offensively.
Paul Hoynes, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks, Dave.
Paul Hoynes, make sure you check him out. Always really good and insightful Guardians coverage. He is the Guardians beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.